Okay. All right. Well, hello. Welcome to today's Pet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Roberta Westbrook, and welcome to the Campus for All Animals, the Houston SPCA. So we have lots to talk to you about today. So as always, start thinking about your questions, because today we are going to be talking about how to integrate a special needs pet into your home. So there are certainly animals that come to us with illnesses and injuries and disease. And sometimes they are special needs and are going to need homes where their families can really spend time with them, have patience, and help them to integrate into our daily lives in a really easy way. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of pets that we have available. And we're going to talk a little bit about special needs pets. So if you have a special needs pet or you have a question about it, please get those questions in the chat and I will see if I can help you. In the meantime, I want to encourage you to come on down to our adoption center and take a look at all of the dogs, cats, puppies, and kittens that we have available for adoption. Today, I want to introduce you to our pet of the week, who is a special needs pet, and his name is
Lotso.
Lotso is a 4-year-old Chihuahua. He's male, and Lotso is blind and deaf. Lotso came to us as part of our cruelty and investigations team, and he unfortunately is a product of improper inbreeding, and that improper breeding has led to two congenital or conditions that he was born with, two congenital disorders, including the lack of eyes and deafness. And so Lotso has been blind and deaf since birth, and he's going to need a special family who's willing to take time with him, to train him, and to get him integrated into regular life. He's a wonderful dog, and he's going to make someone a wonderful pet. So come on down and take a look at him. Okay, well, let's start with some special needs animals. I do have another very, very sweet cat that we have here today. This is Scarlet. Hi, Scarlet. She's beautiful. And you may notice that Scarlet, this beautiful girl, is also blind. She had a congenital condition where she was missing her right eye. This right eye did not form all of the way. And so she had a surgical procedure to remove the remaining structures in the eye. And then she also had a congenital disorder of the left eye, where her eyelids did not form well, and some of the structures of the eye did not form well. And so she was having trouble seeing out of that eye. She did try to have surgical repair of that, but unfortunately it didn't result in her being able to see well. And so she is blind in both eyes as well. But she is still doing wonderfully and will make a wonderful home. I think she has an adopter, and so she is going to make a wonderful pet. Miss Scarlet is so sweet. So does anybody have questions about a special needs pet?
So we have two different types, of pets here. What makes a special need, like dog or cat? What makes them, qualify to be a special needs pet?
There's lots of different types of pets that we can consider special needs. And when we say special needs, we say that these animals are going to need a little bit of extra care and concern as it relates to getting them through daily life. So animals that we would consider special needs would be those that are blind or deaf, maybe even an amputee, an animal that's missing a limb, an animal that is paralyzed in the rear limbs and may need a wheelchair, or paralyzed in the front and needs a wheelchair. These are animals that have conditions that they're going to need a little bit of help getting through daily life. And so they're going to need families who are patient with them and have the time to spend with them to help them through.
And somebody asks, does a special need, do they need to be the only pet in the home, or can they be introduced to others?
They absolutely can be introduced to others. So just like we think of pets that are fully functional, special needs pets can do well with other animals or not. So some of it is still their personality, but it oftentimes does help to have a friend in the home that they can follow. So another dog or cat friend that they can follow, that can sort of teach them not only the ways of the household, but just how to navigate daily life. So yes, it could be actually very beneficial for special needs pets to have another pet in the household that they can live with.
And can a dog like Lotso be trained?
Yes, so that's a very interesting question. Lotso is blind and deaf, and most of our standard ways that we train, consist of verbal commands or visual commands. And so we're not going to be able to use those types of commands with Lotso. But there are training modalities that integrate touch, for example, and scent and smell. So Lotso can still use his sense of smell to help him learn, and can still use his sense of touch. So for example, if we needed to teach Lotso how to sit, instead of using the verbal term sit and oftentimes a physical hand signal to sit, for Lotso, we might take our hand and put it on the rear of his bottom, the base of his tail, and teach him how to sit that way. And every time you want to teach Lotto how to sit, it would require a physical touch of that spot in the same manner every single time, so that he learns sit. It's also important to use rewards, so that whenever Lotso does what we want him to do, that we reward that behavior with a treat. And we repeat that same modality with every trick or every sort of thing that we want him to do. And we're using touch and we're using smell.
And a pet that's just blind, what kind of tricks would you use for training?
Absolutely. So pets that are just blind and you still want to train them, they can still hear. So you can certainly teach them what to do just by using verbal signals. Yes, good job, sit, stay. They can still hear you. And every time they do something that you need them to do, want them to do, you're going to reward them with a treat, and they will begin to learn with auditory signals.
And what type of home will be best for, someone like for a special needs pet? What do we need to consider if we want to adopt one?
Ideally for a special needs pet, particularly one that's blind and deaf, it would be wonderful if they had someone at home to make sure that they stayed mentally stimulated on a regular basis. So when you have a blind, deaf dog at home, for example, like Lotso, it might be a better idea if we had a family where someone was going to be home with him most of the time, so that he could continue to be mentally stimulated, get some exercise, and work on training. Because other animals are able to get visual stimulation and auditory stimulation from their environment, and that keeps them very engaged. But for pets like Lotso, we want to be able to keep them engaged with a little bit more. So that's your presence, using toys. We can see Lotso, for example, having a wonderful, wonderful time with the snuffle mat. It's still a really great way to get him engaged in his environment, have fun, and be mentally stimulated.
So again, that brings us to a good myth. So a lot of people think like somebody like Lotso or like special needs are depressed, they don't have much energy.
Yes, that's a myth. So you can see Lotso has lots of energy. He still has a lot of capability to learn, and he wants to learn, and he wants to please his family. So it's a great bonding moment if you're having a special needs pet, to teach them how to get along in their world, so that they can be more independent. So this means teaching them commands. This means teaching them how to get around and navigate in your home, and maybe even outside. And they can have lots of energy and learn how to play just like a regular dog.
And then what are the tips to prepare your home for a dog that's blind, for example? Are there any tools for somebody that we can use?
Absolutely. So let's say you have a dog that's blind or blind and deaf. But particularly blind, one of the things that we want to make sure when they go into your home is that they learn the lay of the land, so to speak, really quickly. And so initially when you bring your pet into the home, keeping your pet on a leash and guiding them through the home is going to help them learn. And as they navigate through the home, they will pick up scents that will help them to determine where they are in that space. You can also use physical clues like a carpet runner, for example. You can get runners in your home so that your blind pet will stay on a particular path, and your pet will begin to learn that path through the home and where that path will take him or her. Does this path take them to the back door, to the kitchen, to the bedroom, to their private area? And this will help them to learn your home a little bit better using carpet runners or mats so that they have places that they can signal where they are in space.
So then we shouldn't be changing our furniture for feng shui all the time.
Right. So you're not going to want to change your furniture around frequently or at all when you have a blind pet, because once they learn a particular pathway, we want them to be able to stick with that. We want them to develop confidence and be independent. They're not going to be able to do that if they constantly have to figure out where they're going or they're bumping into things. So don't move your furniture around. Keep it in the same place. The same thing with their food and water bowls. Always keep the food and water bowls in the same location so that they can quickly have access to those areas if they need them.
So do they usually have a stronger sense of smell?
Yeah, so they will depend more on it. So certainly when you use one of your senses, or animals use their senses and they develop them, they certainly can become a little bit stronger. And so if the sense of smell is what animals like Lotso depend on, certainly they're going to be honed in on scents and smells, and they're going to use those to help navigate through the home and even through the environment. One thing that you can do for animals like Lotso is use their sense of smell to also designate special areas of the home. So if you want Lotso to be able to recognize where the back door is to go to the restroom, what you might consider doing is putting a particular scent at the back door that Lotso will recognize as this is a signal to go outside to the back door. If you want Lotso to recognize the bedroom as nighttime, what you may do is use a bedroom scent so that Lotso can recognize when it's bedtime and where his bed is. So scents can be very important in those animals.
So can a cat still find its litter box then?
Absolutely. Cats can still find their litter box. So once you teach them where it is, you can even reward them for using the litter box, keep it in the same location, and they will find their way back to that litter box.
So another question, about being safe in a home. What happens when we have guests over? What's the best protocol? Like if we do have a blind dog, and we're having a guest over and they obviously, want to pet them or things like that.
Yes, it's important to educate your guests so that they know that you have a blind dog, because your guests may not be aware. And so they walk up to your dog or your cat and they may want to pet them right away. This could startle the pet. So make sure that your guests are also aware of the type of pet that you have. Then you want to make sure that if you want your guests to interact with your pet, that they're aware. But if you think it's a little bit safer for your pet to be put away, then you can always consider crate training your pet and putting them in a safe area like a bathroom or a bedroom or in a crate during the time that you're going to have a lot of guests so that they don't get too nervous with a lot of pets around, with a lot of new people around.
So what about visiting outside the home? Are dog parks safe for, special needs, or is that something, we shouldn't go to?
They could be safe. So again, the first time you go to a dog park, it's probably important that you go with your pet and see how they're going to interact with the other dogs in the dog park. You could keep them on the leash the first couple of times to see how they're going to react to other dogs approaching them. This could be nervous for them, a nervous experience for them. So you want to see how they're able to handle it. You can guide them. You can use some of your commands like sit and come that you've taught them to help them integrate into that sort of environment. So it could still be a very rewarding, engaging experience for them. If you notice that they're becoming overwhelmed, then certainly you don't have to do the dog park.
An interesting question is, can they tell like night or day, or like how do they know the routine?
A lot of it is really going to be just that routine. They're not going to be able to necessarily sense or see the changes in light, although there might be subtle changes, but a lot of it is going to be routine, and their body will get on a schedule that you create for them. So they may not be able to see the light, but their bodies will sort of sense that based on the routine that you set.
I guess it's almost like daylight savings, where we know the time's difference, but the dog's like, nope, I can sense it's dinner time.
Exactly. They still know your routine. The time has changed and you're getting up, and they have attributed you getting up with breakfast or you getting home from work with dinner. And so even though they may not recognize the changes in the light outside, they do recognize your routine, which is that I wake up in the morning, that means it's breakfast, and I'm home from work, and that means it's dinner.
So then are, special needs pets high maintenance?
You could consider it high maintenance, but we typically use the term high maintenance, as somewhat of a negative term. But high maintenance just means that these pets are going to need your attention, and they're going to need a little bit more of your patience and a little bit more of your dedication to make sure that they have the tools that they need to make it through the world in a very easy way and in a comfortable way for them. So please take the time and the patience to teach them. And when you teach them, it's going to create a bond, and that bond can be very, very special. And so they would depend on you. And in that way, sure, they may be high maintenance, but there's nothing wrong with that.
So then do they need to be in a home where they're like retired or stay at home, or what's the best lifestyle?
If you are able to stay at home with your special needs pet, I think that would be great. It's not to say that it has to be that way, but if you're able to stay at home with your special needs pet, to make sure that they stay safe and to make sure that you're able to keep them on a routine, to make sure that they are staying mentally stimulated and happy. Sure, if you're able to stay at home, maybe you're retired, maybe you work from home, I think a special needs pet would be ideal for you. Is it required? No. They can still have a very fulfilling, happy life, even if you work during the day. We just are going to have to put in a little bit more time after work in terms of training and stimulating them to make sure that they're getting everything they need.
Do they usually require, additional financial costs? Or I guess that depends on the type of disability they have.
It certainly does depend on the type of disability. So if your special needs pet was born a particular way, so let's say like Lotso was born blind and deaf, we believe, that's not going to be any additional cost essentially. But Scarlet, for example, had to have multiple surgeries to try to see if we could restore her ability to see. And so in that way, depending on when the condition occurred and whether or not your veterinarian feels like it's something that can be corrected, that could be some initial cost. But once, like Lotso or Scarlet, once we are at a point where we say this pet is blind or deaf, oftentimes there's not any additional cost associated with that.
And we've seen some dogs in wheelchairs. I guess there's considered special needs as well. Does that mean they're all paralyzed if they're in a wheelchair?
So typically dogs in a wheelchair do have some sort of paralysis where they cannot use their limbs at all, or paresis. Paresis is weakness. So they have some sort of weakness where they are not able to get along quite as well or at all. And so the wheelchair helps them to keep up. It helps them to be more independent. And so certainly they do have usually some sort of muscular or nervous system disorder that causes them to need to use a wheelchair.
And does a pet in a cart, can they still play with other dogs, or is that scary for the other pets?
Absolutely, they can still play with other dogs and run around just like normal. You may have seen some videos of rescue organizations that have lots of dogs that are in wheelchairs. They get along just fine with other dogs that have very similar needs.
And we've seen some dogs like in a custom high chair, like while they're eating. What is that, and what does that mean?
Oh yes, a high chair. So it's possible that you have seen a dog that is eating standing up. They're on their hind legs and they have a high chair where their plate or their food bowl is right in front of them, kind of at mouth level. Usually a dog will need that sort of feeding platform when they have a condition called mega esophagus. Mega esophagus is exactly what it sounds like. Mega means big, and esophagus is the feeding tube, the tube that's in your throat where your food goes down into your stomach. And so a big esophagus usually results in like a sac. The esophagus forms a depression or a big sac right here in the throat where when you eat food, it just sits here in the sac and it doesn't actually make its way down to the stomach. When food sits here in this large sac in the neck and it doesn't make its way into the rest of the digestive system, Animals oftentimes will not get the nutrition that they need, and sometimes they regurgitate the food that's sitting in the esophagus here in their neck, and they'll spit it up. So eating in a high chair or eating standing up helps them use gravity to get the food from their esophagus into the stomach and get the nutrients out of it that it needs. And that's another great example of a special needs pet. Mega esophagus. They're going to need a special feeding platform every day.
And then are they born with it, or is it something that's like with time they can happen?
Both. So some animals can certainly have congenital disorders, but it can happen later as well. So sometimes it can be a neuromuscular disorder. So basically a disorder that affects the nervous system and the ability of our smooth muscle in our body to function well. It could also be caused from toxins and other disorders. So certainly it just depends. There's another condition that puppies get. One of my favorite cases as a veterinary student many, many years ago, more than 18 years ago, was a little Maltese mix that had a heart condition. And this congenital heart condition resulted in a little tiny blood vessel being looped around the esophagus. And because it was looped around the esophagus, it created what we call like a functional mega esophagus or physical stricture and caused a mega esophagus. And it was one of my favorite cases because we were able to perform surgery on that dog, and we were able to save her by removing that stricture. So certainly it could be something that they're born with, but it could be something that they get later in life as well.
And a lot of the cases that we see here are actually tripods. That's considered special needs, or what are the special care if we're adopting a tripod, pet?
Yes. So if you're adopting a tripod or a pet that has an amputated limb, then we would consider that special needs, but I would say that they're probably the least special needs of all of them. If you have a 3-legged pet, you might know that they are just as active and usually don't have many problems at all related to the fact that they only have 3 limbs. They're fast, they run, they jump, they play, and they usually don't skip a beat with having those 3 legs. So certainly there's special needs. Maybe they can't run as far or do quite as much as the dog with 4 legs, but many times they can.
So obviously the tripod, they're not missing anything.
No, they're wonderful, wonderful pet to adopt. We see a lot of trauma here. So our surgeons unfortunately need to perform amputations on a lot of the animals that we have because of the traumatic injuries that they're suffering from and chronic injuries. So it's a wonderful pet to consider. They can do all the things that any other 4-legged pet can do most of the time.
So we've been talking a lot about physical disabilities. Are there any developmental disabilities pets can be diagnosed with?
Sure. We think of developmental disabilities as being kind of related to mental health. And certainly there are pets that have mental health disabilities that have anxiety, like separation anxiety or thunderstorm anxiety and other mental health disorders that we can treat them for. And in those ways, they are special needs as well, because you're going to have to make adjustments to your life and your pet's life to make sure that they stay safe and comfortable and don't live a life in fear and anxiety. So yes, pets can be, diagnosed with mental disabilities or developmental disabilities that can affect the way that they live their life on a daily basis.
And then, a good question is like, how do we ensure our special needs pet is happy?
So yes, you want to make sure that your special needs pet is happy. And so you can certainly look at all the signs that you would normally see in a pet. Do they recognize you when you come home? Do they wag their tail? Are they eating and drinking? Are they active? Do they enjoy playtime? Do they enjoy interacting like on the snuffle mat? Do they enjoy going out on walks? You can make sure that they have a very rewarding, safe, happy life by engaging their mind, engaging their senses, and giving them opportunities to be the best dog or cat that they can be with their disability.
You mentioned anxiety. Somebody asked, how can they help their anxious puppy?
Yes, you have an anxious puppy. So some of the anxiousness of puppy, it could be related to what? Sometimes puppies are anxious when you leave them. So they get anxious when they're by themselves and they feel alone, they don't know what to do. So one of the things that can reduce anxiety is routine. I know I've said it before, but pets love routine. It's predictable for them. It helps them to deal a little bit more with changes in their environment. So developing a routine where they know it's wake up time, it's potty time, it's breakfast time, it's sleeping time, it's play time, that can actually help to reduce anxiety because they can anticipate what the next step in the day is, and they're not wondering, when am I going to be by myself, when is my family coming home. So establish a routine. It can really help to reduce anxiety in your pet. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for today's pet podcast and taking a wonderful look at Lotso and Scarlet here, two of our special needs pets. Thank you for supporting us and being part of our family every week. Please visit our website at houstonspca.org and consider joining us on October 28th, Friday, for our Halloween ball. Yes, our Halloween ball. It's our wonderful annual Halloween soiree. We're going to have dancing. We're going to have drinks. We're going to have puppies and kittens and adoptions. It's going to be a wonderful time. We'll have Halloween costumes. So please go to our website, consider purchasing a ticket and joining us for our Halloween ball, a wonderful fundraiser to help us continue doing what we do, saving animals that come to us for much needed help. So thank you again for joining us. We will see you all next week here at the Houston SPCA. I'm Dr. Westbrook. We'll see you next time.